Hi everyone and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa, host of the Propcast and co-founder of LMRE, the global Proptech recruitment and search consultancy. In this podcast, we'll explore how the digital evolution of the real estate industry is impacting the property market. The aim of each episode is to introduce you to a Proptech innovator and discuss how their work has created a shift in focus when it comes down to digitizing the built environment. If you're interested in finding out more about Proptech or applying for a job in this space or keen to know who the big players are that are moving and shaking the real estate industry up, we have you covered, and we will be bringing you an episode each week to connect to the VCs, Proptech startups, and real estate professionals from around the globe. Also, a big shout out to our sponsors of the podcast, Tech and Pretech, who you will hear from during the episode. Today on the Propcast, we will be discussing how AI software can optimize real estate investment decisions for all sorts of stakeholders. And our guests on today's show are Vincent-Charles, Hodder, CEO and co-founder of Local Logic, and Head of Industry Relations, Sara Maffey. So welcome to the show, Vincent and Sara, who are joining us from Canada and the US.
Hello, it's great to be on.
Great to be on, Lou. Now, everyone, we have been trying to get this podcast booked in for, I think, since about 4 or 5 months ago. And since then, I have had the pleasure of seeing both of them, our guests, at various events, drinks, parties, and I'm about to go see them back in New York, which is super exciting. But outside of our social life, on today's podcast, you're going to learn about Local Logic's product. And those who don't know what it does, Vincent We telling us all about it, but effectively we're going to discuss how we can use AI to predict how cities and neighborhoods can basically make better cities. And this could be looking at the sustainability component. It could be talking about communities. It could be talking about how can you make them more profitable. I don't know. Vince is going to tell us all about it. But then we'll also be talking about, are there any barriers to using data and AI in the industry? How adoption has sort of changed. And then we'll also be hearing about Sara's sort of journey into this world as well. And also what their expansion plans are, which I'm sure they have quite a few sort of coming up, which we're going to hear from both of them about. But without further ado, I'd like to hear from Vincent and start the podcast questions with how he came to founding, obviously, Local Logic and getting into the space. And also, Vincent, please talk me through your product.
Sure. Yeah. So my family's been in real estate for a long time. So I was a young kid, really immersed in that space and kind of heard the war stories of deals being made in real estate. So I was really intrigued and wanted to work as a real estate developer when I grew up. So I was kind of that weird 10-year-old kid that wanted to be a real estate developer. So I ended up going into finance and doing that kind of more traditional path. And then quickly realized that if I wanted to have some sort of edge or a differentiated view on real estate, I needed to kind of have a different perspective. And so I ended up doing a master's in urban planning, where I was really thinking that if I was able to understand the way that cities function, the way that people interacted with the built world, well, I'd have some sort of edge in real estate. And that's where I met my two other co-founders who had kind of very complementary backgrounds, one of them being a programmer, the other one being a scientist. And we realized that there was this trove of data on cities that really wasn't being leveraged in the real estate space. There was a few stakeholders, mostly urban planners, using that data to make decisions, but it was not being leveraged to its full capacity in the real estate industry. And so we really came up with the idea of saying, well, what if we're able to use that data to try to quantify the vibe, the feel of a specific address, the specific area in a neighborhood, and then leverage that data in order to have a better understanding of how cities and location could actually drive value in real estate. And so we started there, and the idea was to try to start quantifying those cities at scale. So we started in Montreal, where we were based, and then it quickly expanded to all of the US and all of Canada. And so today we really try to quantify location at scale to drive decisions in the built environment. And the fundamental thesis for the business is that by understanding cities, well, you have this kind of ultimate edge in real estate, where we're essentially trying to quantify everything outside the four walls of any asset to optimize profitability and sustainability. And we think that by leveraging that data, we're enabling data-driven decisions, which ultimately will enable us to make better decisions as to what should be built where, and making sure that what is currently being built in our cities actually works for the people that live in them. And so we're really, really passionate about that mission. And we've assembled a team of kind of urban planners turned data scientists working in Proptech. So it's a really, really cool area to be in. And I think there's a lot of openness now to adopt more data technology. And it's exciting to see decisions being impacted by the data that we're providing the industry.
No, definitely. And that's an interesting skill set there, Vincent. Urban planners turn data scientists. They must be pretty hard to hire for, but obviously I think data is becoming slightly more sexier and people understanding the pure sort of power of it, what can be done with accurate data. On my sort of side, obviously, for hiring people, that's a tough skill set to find. But no doubt, obviously, I've met a load of your team, looking forward to meeting a few more. Obviously, you have a strong team sheet, part of local object. Now, Sara, we met probably about a couple of years ago when you were obviously looking to break into the Proptech space. And obviously you had conversations going on local logic for a while. And your background is obviously you were at Edgewood, Transwestern, you were in innovation, you've done a bit of consultancy within maybe the traditional side. How did you get into your role of head of industry and meet this fantastic team?
Well, I have actually touched so many different parts of the built environment prior to joining Local Logic, and I think it's really helped me in my current role. I was most recently on the board and managing director of placemaking at Transwestern, and I've always been one of those urban designers that Vince talked about. So, understanding cities and real estate is just something that I'm super passionate about. And I would say some big projects I was working on prior to joining Local Logic, my clients were really looking to use more data to make decisions on how much to spend on repositioning assets and using data to understand that culture and sense of place around buildings when they were doing site selection on the office side. So when I was pitched Local Logic, as I met the guys during their Series A raise, I was just instantly obsessed with what they do. And it was such a great solution for everything that I've been looking for. The idea of actually using data to quantify objectively something that is so often described using gut feel or personal opinion by the brokers and various stakeholders in commercial real estate that I just really needed to join. And that's how I joined as head of industry relations. And I've been kind of leveraging all my personal experience in those different parts of the built environment to really bridge how to use our products and how to help the industry understand how to use more data and technology.
Yeah, well, I think you're obviously very good at what you do, and it must be so important to have that previous experience, what you have at Transwestern, and being able to get buy-in from these major developers and everything like that who are maybe slightly nervous about the words of AI.
Hi, I'm Nelson from Property Quants. We run a hands-on, in-depth course that will teach you to apply data science and machine learning to real estate. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/training. We also run a revolutionary course that will allow anyone to gain data science skills without needing to learn programming. To learn more about that, visit thenocodecourse.com. On either site, be sure to key in the code LMRE5 for a special 5% discount.
Now, Vincent, you obviously touched upon what your product does earlier, how it can obviously assist in development and investment sort of deals and make better communities. But are there any sort of case studies you can talk us through? I always find personally, if I understand, an exact sort of name or case study, helps me understand a bit more sort of about the product as well and sort of connect with it.
I can give a concrete example. I think the whole premise of the business is that there's a tremendous amount of data on specific assets. And most of that traditional real estate data focuses on everything inside the four walls of an asset. So who's the owner? What's the programming of that specific asset? What are the characteristics of the asset? And what we're really saying is, well, guess what? Everything outside of the four walls of that asset has huge repercussions on the value of the asset, but also on what that asset enables people to do or the lifestyle that enables people to have. And so we really look to focus on the characteristics of the location, right? And we have specific models that point to, close to half of the value of an asset actually being able to be explained through the location characteristics. And so what we do is we'll help our customers leverage that location data in order to understand really two main use cases. The first one is, hey, I have this asset or I have this parcel of land. What should I build here? And the other one is, I have a very specific investment thesis where I'm looking for properties with these specific characteristics. Where in the US or in Canada should I be looking to invest or deploy capital in order to have those characteristics? And so a really cool use case that kind of falls in that first bucket, which is there's a developer that had a parcel of land and they were trying to figure out what they should build based on market trends. But they went to kind of the traditional appraisers and traditional consultants, and they had an idea where they were going to build these luxury townhouses. And then all the traditional consultancies said, well, the market can't sustain this. There's no comparables that have been sold in the past year in this area. We really, we can't recommend that you build this specific type of real estate product. And so they came to see us. And what we did was said, well, look, the characteristics of this specific location actually look very, very similar to other neighborhoods elsewhere in the city. And what we're seeing is that there's a tremendous demand for this type of real estate product in these up and coming neighborhoods. And so we believe that the market can sustain a specific absorption rate at this price point. And so we actually recommend that they go out and build because the changes in the neighborhood were pointing in the market actually evolving, actually looking for these types of products. And so the developer kind of followed what the data was saying and ended up pre-selling those units. I think it was like 2 days, sold out that project really, really, really quickly. And we're essentially saying, well, look, we were able to look at leading indicators relating to location, and it enabled us to de-risk an investment that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to de-risk and we wouldn't have done. And so what we're seeing is that there's all these missed opportunities in real estate that were being taken advantage of because there was just half the story missing. And that half of the story was, what is the neighborhood telling us? How is that changing over time? I think it's a really, really good example that shows the value of bringing a data-centric approach to our decision-making in order to de-risk investments and source opportunities that are maybe less obvious, but are really, really interesting in the long run.
And then I guess we've touched upon the communities, I guess the people component. What about the other big component that's on everyone's mind is the sustainability. Before this talk with Jason Stanley, everyone listening, that's Local Audit's incredible head of insights who was speaking to Annie Keaton. So how does the sustainability component tie into your product?
Sure. Well, what we're seeing is that we're really glad this is happening in the industry where there's a huge, huge push to think about sustainability. And I think there's two major components that are currently being looked at. The first one is kind of the operation of the building, and then the materials that are being used to actually build real estate. What we're saying is, well, guess what? The way that we build cities actually has a huge implication on how people move around, on the types of lifestyle that we enable. And so we believe it's the responsibility of the real estate industry to really take a hard look at the types of communities we're building. And there's certain communities that are more sustainable than others, right? So we think about car-centric communities, for example, where the emissions related to the transportation of people, be it employees or be it homeowners, is huge to go and fulfill their daily needs versus denser communities that maybe have the amenities within either a short drive away or where you can leverage kind of more active transportation or public transportation, where the emissions of those types of developments are much, much, much lower. And so what we're saying is, as a developer, you need to start considering the long-term impact of your development or of your assets on the way that people are going to be forced to travel. And so I think if you're considering the long-term implications of those developments on sustainability, I think there's a huge opportunity for developers to actually minimize carbon emissions by building denser communities, by making sure that the day-to-day amenities are actually within a reasonable distance to those amenities. And I think this is something that we're seeing a lot of developers take on, right? We were listening to conferences and certain developers, including Inman Cambridge, are starting to think about these things, right? We have customers that are actually looking to redevelop large assets. And I'm saying, well, the process of redeveloping an asset, I'm going to have to bring in new materials. I'm going to have to operate larger services, right? So there's an intensification of our assets where there's going to be larger operating costs, larger emissions related to operation of more buildings. When in reality, what they're doing is they're intensifying their parcel of land. They're intensifying their project to where maybe there's a grocery store nearby. Maybe there's more amenities. We're going to be able to walk. The emissions related with that development are much lower. Yet in the very short term, if we're purely looking at operational emissions and emissions related to materials, we're kind of seeing this disconnect between the way current ESG measurement happens with kind of the long-term emissions related to city building. And I think as an industry, we are the ones building the cities of the future, and we need to start thinking about these issues, because if we keep building car-centric communities, I think we're not going to be able to hit the targets that we've set as a society when it comes to emissions.
Yeah, I think there's now everyone's paying attention to, I guess, all parts of the built environments and ecosystem. I think when people think Proptech, I do think mobility comes into that, and you can see some of the investments that Biffle's doing, obviously, whether it's into Lime or I don't know, some eco cars and everything like that. So it's just connecting the dots. Now, obviously, Vince just gone into the importance of developers taking into account sustainability, really looking at, especially from sort of COP26, Sarah, for those listening, and obviously you've been in the space for some time, and Vincent's just sort of gone over how there's obviously been an increase in adoption and more demand for stakeholders take sustainability seriously. And obviously since COP26, a huge amount of changes and new metrics and targets have happened. So what major trends and changes have you seen in the past sort of 5 years, or maybe an increase in the past year?
I think most recently, I've definitely noticed that investors are requiring the use of data and specifically the reporting on sustainability. But just in general, I think that there's been a rapid increase in using data and technology to make decisions. I think that there are still firms out there that don't have the ability to necessarily do that internally, which is why, we have our platform, which is a great way to access lots of different kinds of location intelligence and insights very easily. But it's been really interesting, I think, even over the last 6 months, the demand for data via API, that people are using data at scale. And that's one of the things I was thinking about as you were asking, Vince, about examples of how people use our data. We have seen a real increase in people who are acquiring at such a rate right now. And I think it has to do with sort of all of the capital that's out there where they need to understand location at scale. And they're using our location scores as a way of filtering and taking that first pass on opportunities. And that's just like one example. I think that just understanding things outside the four walls of an asset is an area that has really not been fully utilizing data for quite a while. Everyone's really been focused on the asset itself. So to me, that's been just a huge increase that we've seen even in the way that people are seeking us out and seeking out our insights.
The Propcast audience, we want to hear from you. We are adding a new segment to the podcast, and I'll be answering your burning questions live at the end of each episode. I'll be sharing all the tips, tricks, and insights Elamori has gained from being the global Proptech recruitment lead in this space. So please get in touch. Head to www.elamori.tech and drop us a message or question that you want answered. And now, obviously, great to hear that there's been a huge amount of update. Well, what's the next for local logic? I mean, you'll both definitely answer that. I think, Vince, you said there was maybe a potential Series B coming up, and you've obviously launched in the US. Well, I guess I say launched. I think most of your customers are in the US, even though obviously originally headquartered in Canada. So Vince, talk us through what your big plans are, and I guess maybe set a bit about your growth as well. We haven't really gone into that too much, but since I got to know your business a couple of years ago, I've just seen you guys go from strength to strength.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up. I think Sara mentioned, I think data is becoming more and more used in the industry, which is a really good thing. I think for us, we've kind of been at this for 2 years now. And one of the exciting things is we now have, close to 7 years of historical data. And so we're kind of seeing neighborhoods shift through our data. When we first started, the majority of our insights were kind of descriptive insights of like, what's there? Why does it matter? How do consumers value those things? And what we're starting to do now is really help customers in predicting how areas change over time and where we're going as cities and what actions we need to take in order to have the impact that we desire to have and build the communities that we want to build. So I think that's a huge push that we've been making now and really helping our customers do that. Beyond that, like you said, I think we've grown. We're kind of in a position now where I think we have enough insights. We have a really good customer base. We're seeing that growth in our main market, which is the US. We've been hiring there now for over a year. We're continuing to add people almost on a weekly basis, which is really exciting. So over the next year, we're going to be continuing that growth. And like you said, we're starting to fundraise now, which is a really exciting process. And I think we're seeing the excitement both from our customers and also new potential customers that are coming in on a weekly basis now, which is really fun. Beyond that, I think, and we kind of touched on this, but we're seeing a huge push for sustainability and being urban planners at heart. This is kind of one of the core reasons why we're here, where ultimately we want to help the industry make better decisions in order to build better cities. And for us, we define better cities as cities that are sustainable from an environmental point of view, but also from a social point of view, from an economic point of view. And we believe that really de-risking those decisions that investment professionals are making by using data is going to be at the core of that. And so it's just an exciting time to see some of those decisions materialize into real communities and hopefully have positive impacts on people that live in those communities. And so, yeah, I think it's just a generally exciting time to be a local logic.
No, definitely. Those listening in, they will be hiring more in the new year as they grow. So get in touch.
That's right.
For those new to LMRE, we're a global recruitment and search consultancy focusing on placing the best talent into the Proptech and real estate industry. We're extremely fortunate to work alongside the best VCs in the ecosystem to help scale their portfolios and their own teams. We've even had a couple of them on the podcast, such as Meshprop from Fifth Wall, who joined me back in season 1. We've recently started a campaign on our YouTube channel spotlighting a number of VCs from around the globe to take the opportunity to spotlight their business, portfolios, and gain advice from the inside for those looking to access the VC world from both capital and talent perspective. So, are you looking for funding for your own business or interested in the VC landscape? How do they handpick their cohorts? Or if you're just a curious mind that wants to learn more, check it out. Head to LMRE on YouTube, or you can find their interviews on our website. Now on with the show. We're unfortunately coming nearly to the end of the podcast, but Vince and Sara are going to kindly walk us through the LMRE part. I don't know why I say R like that, like a pirate, but I always do. So, hey. So why don't you start us off and I'll talk you through it as well. What's sort of one of the main lessons you've learned throughout your career?
I love this question, Lou, because when I first graduated, from undergrad, I had studied architecture and urban design. And what I'm doing today with Local Logic is something that didn't exist then, not to make myself sound like an old lady, but I think that I've just discovered with each role that I've taken a new aspect of participating in this built environment that really interests me. And so I would say my lesson is, don't get so stuck on thinking that you're going to be this one thing and just kind of evolve with the industry. And it's been a great ride for me.
Going back to that as well, and like Sara, we obviously went on this journey together when Sara was first looking for her next career. I feel like the industry's changed a lot, especially on sort of our digital innovative sort of side, what we like to call sort of Proptech. Now everyone wants people who've done more than one, so just been a broker for their whole life or just been in the digital team. Everyone's looking for like dynamic sort of skill sets. So those listening in, if you're looking for your next step and I guess what sort of roles to go into, like founders, like Vince, they want people from everywhere. And it's generally like, as long as you can bring something to a business, a startup, you just need different sort of creative people in it. So always ask the question, what's out there? Because I'm sure there'll be something. Now, Sara, talk us through, okay, well, is there anyone to give a shout out to, whether it's a product, service?
Well, we recently announced a partnership with Climate Check. Vince probably has other people to mention, but it's been really great to work with Inman and his team. We have incorporated the Climate Check 5 major climate risks into all our products. And I think this kind of ties into where we're going with sustainability and understanding the environment and the environmental impacts outside the four walls of an asset. So for me, that's been a really exciting one that has just come up for us.
Thank you for that. Okay, right. And we go to our third question. What's the most rewarding part of working in this space, other than working with Vince, obviously?
I was going to say working with Vince, no, seriously. But I think for me, I've always been really interested in the future of the industry. And that's what Proptech is. And the stuff that we're working on at Local Logic is just so exciting to think about, not only pushing the industry forward, but we're going to be impacting the way people live on a daily basis and how they experience the world and the built world. So for me, that's probably the most rewarding aspect of working in Proptech.
Right. And what's the most exciting then?
The most exciting, I mean, the stuff that we're talking about sustainability wise, that's the cutting edge right now. That's what we need to be concerned about and focusing on. And I think that's really cool to see that the industry is starting to actually value that and push for it. And so that's really what I'm excited about, is actually starting to incorporate that kind of sustainability into the way that we're making decisions and what Proptech offers.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Sara. And I will see you in a day or two. Vince, okay, talk us through LMRE part. What's your major lesson that you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a fascinating question. I think I might go in the same vein as what Sara said, where one of our values of Local Logic is to seek a diversity of perspectives. And I think from the get-go, what we wanted to create as a company was, let's get a bunch of really, really smart people together in the room with a totally different set of perspectives, experiences on these very difficult questions that is city building. We're urban planners, turned data scientists working in real estate, which is kind of a very different set of skill sets and perspectives. And we've been able to recruit a team of really smart people, really experienced people with very different backgrounds. I think that the biggest learning for me in this process has been the importance of bringing that diversity and inclusivity into the decisions we take, the products we build, and also the way we're approaching the industry and the way we're approaching these important and difficult problems that we need to solve as society, for which I think the real estate industry has a huge, huge, huge part of responsibility in making sure that we're building the cities, the neighborhoods that are going to work for the people that live in them, that work in them, that play in them, and in the long term are going to be sustainable for our planet.
Thank you very much. I love how much when we first started this podcast, we didn't actually discuss also the sustainability component, but it's great to, as I do these podcasts, learning more and more about your product and what key parts of it are. Now, what is the most rewarding part of working in this space, and what are you most excited about, Vince?
I think like a lot of people say that the real estate industry is old school and isn't adopting technology. I think there's a tremendous amount of change happening right now in Proptech, and it's super rewarding to see that change take shape. And I think technology being adopted, and I think this space is changing so quickly that it's interesting to be part of that change, right? Part of that momentum that's currently happening. And I think the fact that the cities that we build today are going to be here for the next 100 years, it's rewarding to know that there's kind of a legacy that we as an industry is leaving behind. And I think this is kind of our generation shaping the way that our cities are going to look and feel and be like for the next 100 years or so.
Beautiful. And is there one particular thing that sticks out for what you're most excited about? Is it further expansion across sort of the US? Is it the big old Series B?
I think what's exciting is more and more adoption. I mean, we're seeing really large brands adopt our technology. We're seeing more and more people adopt data, and more people realizing that understanding location and leveraging more data is going to drive better decisions. And so it's cool to see that shift in the industry. People are also excited about the fact that, I think the first generation of AI is kind of this black box where people would kind of just either trust or not trust the data that was coming out of a model. Whereas now we're really seeing more explainability in AI. And I think that's kind of a lot of our focus of our products is kind of helping the industry understand why a model is performing the way it is, why data sets are relevant in their decision-making process. So I think that's really exciting. And then on the company building side, I think, we're going to go out and continue to expand our products, our services, our content, but also our team. And I think there's a bunch of challenges that are going to be exciting, both on the recruiting side, but also on the management side of building out a company that's going to be remote first with people all over North America and potentially beyond. I think it's going to bring a lot of challenges, but it's going to be a set of really rewarding challenges.
Vince and Sara, it's been a pleasure to finally do this podcast with you. Vince, I'm so sad we won't be seeing you at Propel. Maffey and Sara, obviously can't wait to see you, and also brand new members of your team. And thank you for joining me, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you both after the show.
Great. Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Michael Beckerman from Cretech. I'm here to invite you to check out Cretech Plus, the first streaming platform devoted to innovation and technology in the built world, featuring new weekly videos from the world's leading real estate and tech professionals. The first month of streaming is absolutely free, and then you could use the code LMRE to receive 25% off your second month. To learn more, visit plus.cretech.com.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our guests and our sponsors, Cretech and Reamtech. Make sure you visit our website, lmre.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, keep up with our industry news and events, or if you're looking for your next career move, it's all on there. The Propcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, where all good content is found. Whilst we're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you could spread the word and tell a friend about it, or even write us a review.